so let's get it. Let's start off with the first review, which will be what is it? Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Back, it came out back.
Everyone know that this is the comedy month?
Oh yeah. That I told them. Yes. For those of
Okay.
you just joining us, yes, we every once in a while we do a theme month. I think last month was dystopia. And we've done other. We did. And during October we did. Of course, the Halloween ones, and then in December we did off-brand Christmas movies. So this month, being the only kind of holiday that there was in April is, well, I mean, other than Easter, um, is April Fools, and we decided that we're going to do an all comedy month. And so there are several different genres of comedies, and we picked five, since there are going to be 5 Tuesdays in April. We're going to do each one, and we started off with the kind of the teen sex comedy,
Yep.
and we decided, you would think, being children of the '90s, we would have done American Pie, but we actually went back to the decade that in which we were born, and we did Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
I'll be honest. I have a feeling because I've seen both. Oh, I mean, to me, Fast Times at Ridgemont High is one of those all-time, great comedies. But as someone who enjoyed American Pie and going back and like kind of rewatching it fairly recently, I think Fast Times holds up better today than American Pie does.
I guess I'd agree with you on that.
Like I feel like
I guess
Fast Times
particularly
is
kind
somewhat more
of
relevant.
I guess like kind of like the cultural impact uh, of that movie, because there are still things that people are borrowing or paying homage to from that movie, and I mean in particularly that kind of fantasy scene with Phoebe Cates.
Oh yeah.
Where she jumps into the
Oh,
pool and she comes out and it's like all the sexy times, like, whew.
whew.
I
God.
think most
What were you
recently,
saying, Andy?
I know, right? Like, woo, baseball, baseball. Um, I think most recently, Family Guy has done a bunch of homages to that scene, and bunch of TV shows have, and I think, and what is it? Even in music, that band Fountains for Wayne had that
Yeah.
song "Stacy's Mom," and then it was like most like that their music video was basically an homage to Fast Times at Ridgemont High, uh, particularly that what was it? The famous masturbation scene.
Yep.
Oh yeah, so it's I don't know, how exactly to summarize this movie, but it's just you kind of like your typical scene. What is it? I'm sorry, teens like sex comedy. Where these kids talk about sex. Or talk about having sex, talking about the importance of sex and what have you.
I think you kind of so what I like about the movie is you kind of have a hodgepodge of different types of characters.
Hmm.
It's in that way it's kind of a somewhat diverse movie in a sense because uh, I would think that Stacy is technically the main character, but not really because you follow the exploits of Spicoli, um, Stacy's brother, um, uh, was it Mark Rattler, Mike Damone, and then what was Phoebe Cates' character name? I always forget her name.
Let me look that up real fast.
Yeah.
Cast. Oh yeah, Linda Barrett.
Yeah.
Linda Barrett,
And
Jennifer Jason Leigh, Stacey Hamilton. Judge Reinhold was Brad Hamilton. Forrest Whitaker as Charles Jeffries.
a very young Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah, very young Forrest Whitaker. Let's see. Yeah, Robert Romanos as Mike Damone. Brian Becker as Mark Ratner. Yeah, of course, Sean Penn as Jeff Spicoli. Yeah, it was a very it's the movie tended not to focus on like a particular like one particular character, but it covered of the characters that I just mentioned, it mainly focused around those characters and their own individual kind of journeys through this movie. Of course, with Mark Ratner, AKA also Rat, his kind of infatuation with Stacey Hamilton, and then also Stacey Hamilton and Linda Barrett's characters, kind of like navigating their way through the topic of sex, and then Stacey's brother Brad, who has his own kind of story, which I don't think they go into too fine of a detail, but there's still enough information there to kind of give him some of the limelight. But I don't know. To me, it was kind of a little bit too much of like a little bit too much of a shotgun, where it's like it was spread out just a little bit too much for my taste. Even though I still enjoyed the movie.
Because I see this movie as kind of like an anthology of different stories, and in the case of like Brad, yeah, because Brad is kind of like the majority of them are kind of like around the same age. They're growing up together.
Mm-hmm.
Brad is kind of the character that he's a senior. He's trying to move on, getting ready to move on, and like kind of make things happen for himself. And so he kind of comes off as this mature guy, but he's kind of a typical dope. It's kind of a stupid teenager. I'll say, and then you have you have Spicoli as the burnout. That's just kind of like he's he's wasting his life and he's dumb, and he's actually a lot smarter than people give him credit for. I actually think that while his rudimentary understanding of the forming of the United States is actually a lot better than most kids today.
Right. Yeah. Like yeah, because he kind of has like this battle of wills with his history teacher, and in like I think the pettiest of moves, the teacher comes to his place and tells him like, oh, you wasted 8 hours and something minutes of my class time. So I'm gonna come to your house on your time and get back those 8 hours that you took from me. And and he kind of just goes over everything that he basically went over during the class during the semester. And and he kind of I think at the end he ends up with this kind of begrudging respect to Spicoli.
And actually, to be honest, like we could all use a teacher like Mr. Hand because
Hmm.
you could tell he gives a damn about teaching.
Right.
I didn't see it as something as like, oh, he's kind of petty. It's like, oh, you took my time up, now I'm gonna take up your time.
Hmm.
It's like because if he didn't care about it, it's like, oh, okay, whatever. He's wasting his life. I don't need to. Why am I going on my own time to try to like waste his time? It was more of
Hmm.
like I want him to learn this,
Right. Well, yeah. I mean,
and
it just yeah. It like yeah, because well, at least that's just the way. I mean, I understand, yeah, because he is a very dedicated educator. But it could be interpreted as being as petty for him to go and to it's because Spicoli was about to go to like the end of the year dance or whatever, and the teacher comes and just like, hey, you wasted 8 hours of my time. I'm gonna waste 8 hours of your time.
so I'll say that. Okay, so for the movie, I would say that the true like main characters are like where the majority of the story revolved around.
Hmm.
Because Spicoli was kind of more of like the comic relief, in this
Right.
comedy.
Yeah.
That's kind of a weird
Yeah,
way
he didn't
way to
really.
phrase
Yeah,
it.
he didn't really have an arc. He just kind of like floated throughout the movie, kind of interacting with, like I guess like the main cast, in quotes, of course, and just more or less being there, as opposed to like really having any kind of bearing on the main plot of the story.
Right. The true like four main characters are they kind of play off of each other. It's Stacy and Linda and Mike and Mark.
Right.
Those are the true like main four characters.
Hmm.
And you have you know Mark is kind of just he's the typical like nice guy. Um, it's not obviously it's just he's kind of the nerd kind of the do-gooder, follows the rules, doesn't want to like rock the boat, but he's a young guy, and
Hmm.
he's interested in he finds Stacy attractive and wants to ask her out and do all that stuff. Then you have his friend, quote unquote friend Mike, who's kind of a huge sleazeball. Uh,
Right. I mean, because like it kind of opens up following Mike Damone's character, and then you find out that he's kind of like the bad stereotype of like an Italian American, always on the grift, kind of like a greasy, slimy character.
right.
More, both, kind of, in terms of like moral and ethically. And he's like scalping tickets to shows and things, and like the first one of the first interactions he has is with a couple of kids, and he's like trying to sell them tickets to like a concert. um, so I mean, you don't think that there's going to be too much depth there, but he ends up having his own arc where he kind of proves the stereotype correct, because he gets with Stacy, and then she gets pregnant, and um, she asks for his help in the abortion, but he doesn't come through. That which is another kind of terrifying thing, at which like they kind of just like
I think that
they kind of glaze over that whole thing, and it's like there's no like parental like oversight, it seems like, over these kids, and it's just and it's kind of terrifying that they casually put in this abortion subplot in, and and Mike and Mark, they kind of have a falling out, and it's like it would seem like it's one of those friendship ending kind of falling outs, because here Mike is Mark's like best friend, and he even like, and even in their even in the confrontation, he says like, oh, everyone at school talks all this mess about you, and I'm always the idiot that's defending you, saying like, oh, you just need to get to know him and things like that. And he essentially breaks the bro code, and sleeps with the girl that he's absolutely in love with. And you think there's no way back from that, but at the end of the movie they end up reconciling, and just like, excuse me.
If that was me, I would have told him to pound sand.
Right. It's just like it. It's like betrayal on betrayal from Mike Damone. But then at the end of the movie, it's like, oh well, it's all just water under the bridge. Yeah, buddy. And then it's like how does one how does that one reconcile that? Because one, he beds the girl that you are absolutely in love with, and two, like he leaves her hanging. Not taking responsibility for his action. I mean, again, like him like taking responsibility is the murder of his child, but let's get beyond that. He doesn't step up. Um, you know,
he
he's completely dismissive of Mark's feelings.
True. Well, and Mike's whole demeanor though is kind of like it's a house of cards. It's all this. It's a fake front that he puts up. He's kind of this
it's a facade. It's a facade for sure.
He pretends to be this cool suave guy. It's like there's a scene where Mark is trying to get up the courage to ask out Stacy. And it's like, Rat, you gotta there's five things you gotta do to get this girl. And it's like, and I'm gonna give you this information for free. Guys are killing for this information, Rat. It's kind of this huge shtick that he puts up, and but then when it comes to like when he does end up kind of betraying Mark and hooking up with Stacy, you can tell like he has no idea what the hell he's doing, for one. and then when it comes
it's just like his advice, is kind of like it's kind of like it comes out of like a 14-year-old's understanding of how to like talk to girls or whatever.
Right, but then it's kind of, and then when it comes time to and it's based off of like what because you see him like at home, like he's watching these movies that are kind of like these type of characters that he's kind of imitating.
Mm-hmm.
And then
which reveals that he doesn't know shit either.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's where you see the facade, and then when it comes time to step up and actually be responsible, he can't do it. And I also kind of wonder, because you also said there's not really any authority figure around. The only adult that we really see is Mr. Hand, the teacher.
Right.
Like
because like Stacy and Brad's parents, they're like always out. Away or out, or so it's like.
And then you have like Mike, I think, just lives on his own. Like,
he lives with his mom, or he lives with his parents. But they're lower, they're lower middle class. And so like they live in a kind of like a shoddy apartment. And when Stacy calls him to say like, "Hey, where are you? I need that money for the abortion." The mom like kind of. The mom kind of like runs interference, but kind of in that mom way where it's like, Mike says to tell you that he's not here.
Yeah.
Or, or the mom says like, oh, he's out in the garage helping his dad or something. And it's just like, well, like, get his ass on the phone. But
right.
So.
But and then you look at the opposite end of the spectrum. The other team of two you have with Stacy and Linda. Linda to me is the female version of Mike Damone, whereas like everything that she says.
Hey, could you tilt your camera up a little bit? Your eyes are cut off.
Sorry.
There it is. Okay. All right, perfect. Go.
Yeah, but I was saying is Linda is essentially the female Mike Damone, where she's giving Stacy all this advice, and it's all terrible, terrible advice. But then her whole like she's talking about, oh, I'm with in this relationship with this older guy, and we do all this stuff, and blah blah blah. It's like I have a feeling none of that happened. And so she there's a guy that's at this the mall at the like the pizza place where they work. They Stacy is being hit on by this older guy who potentially thinks that she's older. I kind of doubt that that's the case. And so,
Right. Yeah. No, and
Linda
like
kind
yeah,
of
and the argument that you put forth definitely, yeah, I'm starting to see that as well. But we can get into that later. But continue.
yeah. So I was like, but Linda kind of pushes Stacy. Oh, just go for it, and just tell him you're like 19 or something like that. So this guy who's he's a VCR salesman or electronic salesman, and apparently he's 26 and seems to have like a decent amount of money for a 26-year-old.
All right. He had his own. He had his own car. He had a business card. So,
Yeah, so
safe to assume that he's pretty well established. He has his own money. He lives on his own. I mean, as far as we can tell.
right. So he asked this girl out, Stacy, who we're told that that he thinks she's 19. I kind of don't think so. And this is where this movie is like it's kind of there's comedy in it. It's very funny. It's a great movie, but it's really dark in certain places because that scene with that guy and Stacy where she's going to be losing her virginity. The guy asks like, "Oh, hey, where do you where do you want to go?" And he takes her to instead of like a real man, he takes instead of taking her like a hotel or like going out to like a nice dinner, they go to a public park in the dugout of all places, and it's just I don't know. It's kind of like why would a 26-year-old take
And
someone that is
and he had a blanket. Like whether he prepared that blanket or he just kind of keeps that blanket in the car, but he had the blanket.
Is it like James? Yes. I so a little bit of a side note, kind of a funny story, and this is not what he was doing, because our friend James, who from the podcast, he he's an occupational therapist, so like sometimes his hand he's washing his hands a lot, so his hands get dry.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes he works a lot of crazy hours, so he has like a pillow and a blanket in his car. But I remember like the first time like I rode in his car, he had the blanket and the pillow with the like the lotion back there, and then he had like for whatever reason these like club flyers with these scantily clad women. I was like, "What the hell are you doing back here?" He's like, no, that's not what I'm doing. It's like,
okay,
sure,
actually, that's the first time I've ever heard this story. Or
you didn't.
or the first time I've heard this anecdote. So,
but I was like, you're right.
It's funny. But it's really funny.
Yeah. I don't know that.
And so, yeah, I think I guess to your point, it's like so you're you're the mind where it's like he knows like that this 26-year-old guy knows that this girl's only 15, and it is and he doesn't.
Oh no, I was saying it's like so he takes her to this place that's secluded and where no one's gonna really like find out that they end up sleeping together. That he slept with some girl that's 11 years younger than him, that's in high school.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, just again, I mean, I think because we're watching it as as older men, we kind of see it with different eyes now, and I mean, one of the things that I couldn't help but be horrified at is like this, here's this girl, it's her first time, and and she's having it, at this park, at a dugout, at presumably, I mean, it doesn't look like it was like an abandoned park, but it's definitely after hours, and and they have sex, in this dugout where like little kids, who play like little league and things like that, and then as she's being deflowered, she like looks up and there's like all this graffiti, and it's just kind of like, and then it kind of pulls out into this wide shot of kind of like the baseball diamond and the dugout, and it's like this is where this girl is losing her virginity, and it's
Well,
just and I don't know, it just kind of made me, it just made me feel sad.
it was well, and it was also referred to as the point. So this is probably where a lot of people end up having sex.
True, right? Because and it's funny because even that guy, that 26-year-old guy, knew. I mean, he might have just been from the area, so he's aware of it. Um,
Or he
but
may have like gone to that school in the past and like he knows
right,
about,
exactly, and that's why he knows of it, and so. But yeah, it's just I just couldn't help but have like this sad feeling. It's like, oh, like baby girl, this is where your first time is, and this is like the first, this is your first foray into an adult physical relationship. It's, it kind of, and it made me feel like a sadness.
but it's one of those things where it's like you have a lot of yeah, if I was like, man, this is a fucked up scene.
Yeah.
For one, um, where that guy like is clearly, there's something wrong with that guy, but I also think it was like the only reason that Stacy went through with it is because she in some weird way is kind of looks up to her friend Linda. It's like, oh, she's this sexually experienced, like she's mature now. And because that's the way that she presents herself.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, it's all bullshit.
Right.
And it's where like and towards the end of the movie, you see where like Stacy has definitely matured as a person, whereas like Linda kind of breaks that facade breaks down at the end of the movie.
Or well, yeah, like not so much that the facade breaks, but she just kind of doesn't progress, and kind of in the style of Animal House, they do the kind of the end of the movie wrap up with kind of like text explaining what happens to these people, and and for Linda, her character really didn't progress or mature, because she ends up going to a college and then shacking up with like her, I forget what it was, like some like abnormal, yeah, like abnormal psychology professor or something. And it's like,
that sounds about right.
That's for her character arc, that sounds about right. All right, I think we pretty much reviewed the crap out of this, so let's give our ratings. Rob.
Well, wait, one more thing before we do our rating. What was your favorite scene, or like what you felt was the funniest scene in the movie?
It'd probably have to be with Spicoli. He takes what is it? Forrest Whitaker's character, Charles Jeffrey's car, with his little brother, and they're smoking weed and they're driving and like kind of driving erratically, and then Spicoli crashes the car, and then he's like, oh, I can totally fix this, and it's like, my dad, he's like I don't know, I forget what he was, like a refrigerator repairman or something.
No, so yeah, so the line was, because this is also my favorite scene, is like, man, my dad's a television repairman. He has a wicked set of tools. I can fix this. It's like, and his friend, the Forrest Whitaker's little brother, is like, it's like, oh my god, my brother, he's gonna shit. He's gonna kill us. Like, what, is he gonna shit or is he gonna kill us? It's like, he's gonna shit and then he's gonna kill us. And then like to cover up for it, like they made it look like it was the rival school, like their football
Right,
team
their
that
football
like
team doing it
destroys
to like to
cars.
yeah, to mess with him, and then yeah, which then it kind of has like this really peculiar effect where like it amps him up and then makes him more aggressive during the game, and they end up winning.
In a blowout.
Yeah, in a blowout. So yeah, I would say that's my favorite scene in the movie.
And one last thing before we because this will be kind of like how we kind of pair this movie into our next one is it's kind of like a almost a throwaway kind of scene um, where Stacy is we mentioned it briefly where Mike gets Stacy pregnant and she ends up going for an abortion, and it's just kind of like this really, I don't know, in the movie it's just like, because I completely forgot about this scene in the movie, um, but it's just kind of like that to me was like the really like sad point where yeah, it's kind of, it was just it was a little weird.
Right, because what is it? Again, no parental supervision. So Stacey asks her brother to give her a ride, but it's but she doesn't tell her like where they're going. So she lies to him and say, "Oh, can you take me bowling? Me and my friends are gonna go bowling." So he go so Brad goes and drops her off at the bowling alley, and then he's about to take off, but then he sees in his rear view that she doesn't go in, and she actually starts walking down a bit, and he follows her, and then finds out that she had an abortion, and it's just like in a really kind of loving and passionate way. It's like hey, yeah, like it's like since when do you bowl, and like just kind of is there for his sister, and I guess keeps the secret for her, uh, but at the same time I couldn't like I was like I was imagining myself in that role, and just like how is Brad not filled with homicidal rage right now? And just like kind of like plotting the murder of Mike Damone.
Well, she never does like tell him.
But he does figure it out, because he's like it was Damone, wasn't it? And she's like, yeah.
True. That's yeah. It was just a weird like kind of like semi throwaway scene, but it's kind of it was kind of sad.
Yeah. And all right. So on that cheery note, how do you rate this movie?
I'm gonna go 3.8. Just because I feel like a lot of the characters are representative of a lot of like what today's youngsters are dealing with. Um, it has a lot of like funny moments, but at the same time, it also has a lot of very serious moments. And I never thought that I would break this movie down quite like I did, because there's a lot of like really deep, um, kind of yeah, deep moments in the film where it's like, wow, there's a lot to really unpack. And um, it said, a lot of the characters they have good depth to them. You have Stacy and Mark are the ones that really like grow and mature and tend to be the most level-headed. Whereas you have like the people around them, like they're not so great friends who are kind of they put up a facade, but they're kind of fuck ups. And you get the I would say Sean Penn's greatest role, Jeff Spicoli.
Just
um, yeah, I don't know. I really like this film.
learn
I
it,
know it.
know it, live it.
Yeah. I don't know. I find it's a great film. I've probably watched it a dozen times.
Mm.
I still like it as much as I've ever liked it.
Well, as for me, I'd give it a 3.5. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think a lot of I don't think there was a not. I don't think there was that great of resolution for the characters, and I think well, it was directed by a woman, so there you go. Um, I'm just kidding. I'm just
Well, I
kidding.
think
But it's just
yeah,
like, yeah, I just think there's just like it's there's I just think I even though I still enjoy this movie, and and every once in a while I will watch it. I just don't think the direction was that strong, and I don't think the resolution for the character were all that satisfying. Although I still enjoy this movie, and and still chuckle. But yeah, I
well,
give it a three and a half.
I would say that, like, yeah, as far as like the resolution in a case, like, for one, their lives are still all ahead of them. They're all high schoolers. So to have their happy ending all kind of like wrapped up at the end, that's well, their life is still going on.
Yeah, I mean, again,
So
I grant that, but for my own personal taste, I just wish there was like,
I get that. Okay, that makes sense.
yeah, just for my own personal taste, I just didn't feel the resolution to the characters was all that satisfying. So there you have
Okay,
it.
yeah,
Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Robert a 3.8. I give it 3.5. Go watch it for yourself. You might not have as a cynical or dark view of this movie as we did, but